dimensions and regional view when we think about groundwater, which is so important as we look across the world and try to create actually policies and priorities to make the invisible visible. As mentioned by our dear colleague, this session is organized by the 5 regional commissions covering the globe, from Africa with ECHA, Latin America with Latin American Caribbean with ECLAC, the European and North Africa region with UNECE, Asia and Pacific with our colleagues at ESCAP, and ESCWA, where I am based in Beirut, covering the Arab region. And as regional commissions, we have been working in support of the Water Action Decade, as well as the Groundwater Summit, through preparatory meetings in each of the regions. In fact, we held, each of us, a regional preparatory meeting during the first part of this year, focused on water and with components on groundwater in order to prepare for this summit and the UN, the 2023 UN conference on water conference in March. We've also incorporated dialogues in our efforts, and this is what some of the outcomes will be shown by my colleague later on today, because we not only prepare for this summit and the Water Action Decade midterm review in March, but also when we talk about SDG 6 under the high-level political forum process that happens each year in July. Indeed, the regional commissions organize regional forums for sustainable development. And this year, maybe the outcomes of this forum and the importance of groundwater will be better highlighted when we have those regional forums in early next year in preparation for the 2023 high-level political forum. I don't want to go much long. We have a very distinguished panel here with us. I'm going to invite our Undersecretary General and Executive Secretary of ESCWA, the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, to start us off with an opening address on her as Executive Secretary of ESCWA, but also on behalf of the 5 regional commissions. Dr. Dashti, if I might invite you to the podium to give your opening remarks.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning, everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Water is life, and water security is human security. It's about our security. Yesterday, we heard about the importance of making the invisible visible. As we advocate to make groundwater more visible in agriculture, industries, cities, and in our daily lives, I say that we not only need more visibility, but also need to ensure groundwater sustainability to achieve water security for all, and particularly in regions most vulnerable to water security, scarcity, drought, and disasters. Groundwater, as all of you know, is a strategic resource, yet, unfortunately, it's not strategically managed. In sub-Saharan Africa, groundwater could satisfy rapidly increasing water demand and support economic development. However, overexploitation threatens water security in cities, remote communities, and productive ecosystems. In Europe, some 75% of households depend on groundwater, while in North America, dependency in groundwater has increased in recent years. Pollution risks have raised awareness of the need to protect water quality to avert health hazards. In Latin America and the Caribbean, specifically in arid and semi-arid zones, groundwater plays a key role in the water supply systems of most cities. However, improved groundwater protection and monitoring are needed to tackle intensive exploitation and increasing contamination. The Asia-Pacific region, the largest groundwater abstractor region worldwide, includes 7 of the 10 largest groundwater extracting countries. More sustainable groundwater management practices are needed to integrate groundwater protection into urban and rural development strategies. In the Arab region where I come from, groundwater is the primary water source for more than half of the countries, with most aquifer systems in the region shared by 2 or more states. However, fossil groundwater is being extracted at unsustainable rates to support food security and livelihoods, while the salinization and pollution of coastal aquifer systems threaten the ability of cities and informal communities to meet their basic needs. Colleagues, collective commitment is needed to sustainably manage groundwater resources. And I can't stress more than this. Yesterday we heard it, and I'll stress it again. Regional coordination provides a critical bridge between the global and national levels, and between countries and communities that share aquifer systems. In this regard, the following 5 priorities interventions are proposed. First, improved groundwater governance and participatory approaches are needed that benefit from indigenous knowledge, innovative technologies, and regional dialogue. Second, sustainable groundwater management requires cross-sectoral partnership and integrated plans that take into consideration the needs of multiple users and the protection of the resource from various sources. Third, as a strategic resource, groundwater should be a core component of national development plans and regional initiatives, including those that enhance transboundary cooperation and reduce risk posed by climate change and human-made disasters. Fourth, improved data and information are needed to inform action and cooperation at the aquifer level. This is why ASQA is launching the Arab Groundwater Knowledge Platform to improve the availability and accessibility information on renewable and non-renewable groundwater resources in the region. And last, finance, as usual, is needed to implement groundwater projects that are based on a shared knowledge base, stakeholder engagement, and strategic plans that consider the needs of present and future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, this Groundwater Summit highlights the critical importance of protecting groundwater as a strategic resource at the country level, regional and global levels. This urgency must be carried forward to the United Nations 2023 Water Conference, the regional preparatory meetings for the high-level political forum on sustainable development, and in our collective efforts towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Together, the United Nations Regional Commissions are dedicated to making groundwater more visible. We look forward to continuing to work with the UN Water family, our member states, and with you to ensure that groundwater is central to ensuring sustainability, peace, prosperity, and security for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dashti, for providing a stage setting from the regional commissions on this important project. As we move forward, before we get into our distinguished panel, I'd like to invite my colleague Ziad Hayat, who coordinates the IWM for Improved Water Security project at ESQA, to share with us an overview prepared by the 5 regional commissions. I'm going to encourage him to be as quick as possible, though, because we started late, so that you have some highlights from each of the 5 regions before we start our high-level panel. Thank you. Ziad.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Caro. And I'll promise I'll be as quick as possible going through this overview and I'm only able to scratch the surface of the wealth of information provided and the work done by the 5 regional commissions. So I encourage you to visit the background brief that has been prepared by the 5 regional commissions for this session, and also revisit the chapter on the regional chapter in the World Water Development Report of this year on groundwater. So this has been a collaborative effort by the 5 regions presenting groundwater challenges, opportunities, and priorities for the region. And I thank all of the colleagues. I will take you on a world tour, but a world tour of groundwater through the different regions of the 5 commissions. We will start with Africa, and Africa is probably one of the regions that water is still underused, and it has a very high potential for economic development in the region. With that development, there are several challenges that come, and we will see this challenge which is common in all of the regions, which is governance. There's a great challenge in overcoming the institutional and the governance of groundwater that comes with this development. Another challenge, I'm sorry, my eyesight is not that good, is with monitoring and data availability, and that's also a common challenge that's seen in all of the regional commissions, the lack of data, available data, and monitoring tied with these groundwater and making it more visible. Another challenge in Africa is the capacity and the human resources, the needed human expertise, the human resources to manage this resource is greatly, there's a great lack and need for experts in that sense. And also the challenge of maintaining the groundwater quality is a big challenge. There are several opportunities that are seen to push forward the groundwater development in Africa, and these are conjunctive use of groundwater and surface water to help sustain these resources, transboundary aquifers, where we are seen as an opportunity to promote joint work and understanding, and technical advancements that would help in the sustainable management of groundwater, but that also has to be accompanied, as we said, with an increased resources of experts that are able to carry that work. In terms of priorities for the Africa region, the priority is investment, finances, to promote more efficient groundwater construction standards, and also in the institutions needed to manage this groundwater resource. A priority is also seen, and this is common in all of the regions, in improving management and governance of the groundwater, and also availing more data and information on groundwater. You will see these priorities repeated in the regions that are common: governance, data and information, and finance. This is a common priority for them. Our next stop in our tour is in the region covered by ECE. There we will look at the European Union, USA, and Canada with increased importance of groundwater and dependency of residents on groundwater. In terms of challenges, climate change and water scarcity, the challenges are increasing with climate change and the increased impacts of climate change. So that's seen as an important challenge there. Protecting groundwater-dependent ecosystems, and we also see the challenge of quality, data sharing, monitoring, and the complexity of the groundwater makes that difficult. And also the number of agreements on transboundary aquifers is one of the challenges, and dedicated agreements that are specific to groundwater and are not only surface and groundwater. That's one of the challenges. In terms of opportunities, when we look at the EU, the opportunities are there for improving quantitative and chemical status of groundwater, harmonizing approaches across EU, improving policy coherence in Eastern Pan-European. There's an opportunity of implementing technical solutions to groundwater and strengthening environmental protection. And in North America, there are several market instruments, market-based mechanisms that are seen as opportunities for improving the sustainable management of groundwater. Again, in terms of priority, we see availing more groundwater data and knowledge, monitoring networks, and monitoring specific to certain emerging pollutants. We also see integrated policies and capacity building where there's a need for more experts dealing with groundwater. Our third stop is in Latin America and the Caribbean. 1 minute. Wow, I have to be really fast. I only have 1 minute. Okay, so there again we see the challenges tied to groundwater quality and groundwater management in there. Opportunities also exist for improving the monitoring networks, sustainable management, technical knowledge, legal, economic, and in terms of priorities, again, we see management and governance frameworks need, harmonizing decision-making, and accessibility and affordability to groundwater. In terms of the Asia-Pacific region, again, with the great dependency on groundwater, it's one of the biggest users of groundwater. We also see the challenges of severe depletion, legal institutional instruments, lack of monitoring climate change, and in terms of priorities, again, governance, transboundary management, adaptation to climate change, institutional capacities, and protection of water-related ecosystems. Our last stop is in my region, in the Arab region, a water-scarce region, highly dependent in terms of food security and usage of groundwater. And there we see the challenge is the increased use of the groundwater, the over-extraction of groundwater leading to drop in water levels, and this is a huge challenge, especially with the large number of non-renewable fossil aquifers in the region. Also a challenge of controlling the quality of the groundwater, the climate change impacts, which is we are seeing it increasing the impact on groundwater. There are opportunities in innovative management tools in the region, such as the aquifer contracts in Morocco, the local communal management of the AFRAG systems. Innovative technologies are seen as a great opportunity, and transboundary groundwater cooperations, where we have in several of our major aquifers some cooperation modalities. Priorities, again, improving knowledge, improving groundwater governance, transboundary aquifer cooperation in the region with the importance of these aquifers, managed aquifer recharge seen as a tool to deal with the climate change and water scarcity, and that's greatly practiced in the Gulf region, and more understanding of the impacts of climate change. I thank you for coming along on this tour, and return it back to Carol. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ziad. So now we're going to turn to our very distinguished panel, which I'll introduce now in order, and then we will invite you each to provide a 5-minute intervention. But in view of time, Ambassador Blanca Jimenez Ciciero, she is a bilateral ambassador of Mexico to France, and representing, of course, our Latin America and Caribbean region. His Excellency Minister Nizar Baraka, Minister of Equipment and Water from the Kingdom of Morocco, will be representing the Arab region. His Honorable Karl Shejlwin from the Minister of Agriculture, Water and Land Reform from Namibia will be representing the Africa region, and currently serves indeed of the 13th President of AMCAO. Dr. Eles Bizrak, who serves in the Ministry of Water and Spatial Planning in the Republic of Slovenia, and also is the lead international water cooperation expert and vice chair of the UN ECE Water Convention, which is a global convention, but also representing in this case Europe and North America, and Professor Abhijit Mukherjee, a distinguished professor from the Indian Institute of Technology in Kharagpur for the Asia and Pacific region. So as we are seated, if I might ask Ambassador Jimenez, if you might share with us a bit your views on how these challenges and opportunities expressed for Latin America and Caribbean reflect, of course, for Mexico and the region as we look forward to addressing the protection of groundwater. Please.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation to my IHP colleagues, and notably to Alice Orelli for having me here. I'm very happy to see you all again. I will try to be very fast. So I would like to make 4 points. First of all, allow me to inform you that Mexico is very well placed to represent Latin America region. We have an arid and semi-arid region, but at the same time, we have a very wet area and we have international aquifers. So following this, I will go very fast to provide the main ideas. Concerning transboundary water, we have on one side the United States, and on the other side, Salvador and Guatemala, where is plenty of water. And I really think that we need to start looking at the way in which the principles to share transboundary water have been set in general, because normally we have this idea of the first first served, first in time, and it has all the rights. Because the way in which IHP even made its assessment is cut in the areas, is cut in different areas, and we're connected. You cannot see North America and then start talking about Latin America, because the groundwaters are the same. So we need to find how in one area which have been already been using groundwater is safe to allow other areas to be developed. I will leave that idea there. Concerning the arid and semi-arid regions, there, as it has been said, it has been mentioned, we need to improve governance, but we need to start at looking at it differently. Water problems is a complex problem, and I noticed that in all the slides, we're still looking at it as if it was a photograph, and it is not. There are many areas, still not only sectors, but the problems are constantly changing, and we cannot give one solution. And for in the areas where it's plenty of water, I think that it's necessary to do monitoring, but we do not need to have data to start acting. Where pollution is evident, where problems of desalination are evident, we need to start acting. And I think my 5 minutes are gone, no?
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and for sticking to the time. It shows that your experience working with UNESCO before and actually being Vice Chair of UN Water has shown the importance of efficiency, but getting straight to the point. Thank you for sharing that. Minister Baraka, as a ministry that covers so many sectors, and also given your experience in economics and finance before, how do you think Morocco is addressing the challenges and opportunities facing the use of groundwater, both in terms of the Maghreb and the Arab region at large? Please.
I'd like to first and foremost thank you for this opportunity, and also tell you, as was reminded earlier, that it's a general problem that covers all continents, and the Arab countries are among the most affected by this issue. We have 19 countries today in the Arab region which are in a situation facing water scarcity, so less than 500 cubic meters of water per resident. And this situation is exacerbated by a rising population, by also rising pollution as well, in addition to the fact that we have climate change today that has enormous repercussions on the Arab region. Moreover, most of this water is from aquifers that are trans-boundary aquifers that can lead to conflict. And so all of this means that we've had to take action these past few years. And in Morocco, we're facing water scarcity. We have 600 cubic meters per resident, and we're looking at 500 cubic meters by 2030. So now, what do we do in this situation? We have 3 levels of action that we've planned out. First of all, reduce pressure on groundwater through mobilization of non-conventional water, 149 dams with 19 billion cubic meter capacity. And by 2030, we plan to move to 24 cubic meters capacity of storage, thanks to other dams. We also have 300 smaller dams that are being constructed. And the second aspect, that's also a major aspect, is that we're going to start a large-scale desalination initiative to desalinize 1 billion cubic meters every year. So that's also an important aspect. The city of Rabat is entirely supplied with water for the golf grounds and for the canals, etc., by using this process of desalinization. And we're going to move to 149 cubic meters by 2025 to reuse wastewater and further increase this capacity by 2050. The other element on which we're acting is to act on the demand aspect. So when we're moving, for instance, in agriculture to drop-by-drop irrigation, so 700,000 hectares have been converted to this kind of irrigation. We're going to further increase this surface by 2030. And the second aspect is that we're trying to once again replenish the groundwater resources, thanks to the smaller dams that we're building. And lastly, we're going to try and conserve these resources. And we're in fact signing contracts with local users to ensure a local level governance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for sharing those insights and looking at also alternatives, how to build and complement the water scarcity challenges through groundwater and other sources. And as we move from the Maghreb, we have all of Africa then to consider with the President of the Arab Ministerial Council of Water, your Honorable Shezlin, Minister of Water, Agriculture, Water and Land Reform of Namibia. The challenges facing Namibia are great, and the challenges facing the 55 members of AMCOW are even greater. As we look to exploit groundwater to complement the water scarcity and water resources, as well as looking at the development issues that challenge the continent. Could you please share with us your insights on what is being addressed and what is being prioritized on groundwater for Africa and Namibia?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Now, we were covered by the first speaker and the second speaker, so I'm not knowing whether I'm still relevant here, but let me let me try to take a little bit of a different angle. The first, yes, it can be confirmed that groundwater is invisible or underutilized and must be developed to service our ambition of development and improving lifestyles. That is granted. It is also granted that Africa needs much more from everything that is available currently. So we are the overlooked continent when it comes to many development aspects. Now let me zoom in on groundwater or water supply, therefore. Africa's potential is huge. We use 16% of our total demand out of groundwater resources. The rest is surface water by and large. But we believe that the problem is bigger than use either groundwater or surface water. The problem lies in a well-managed integrated water system. And let me use Namibia as an example here. We have in the main city in Windhoek, we use surface water, groundwater, and we reclaim water and we actively recharge groundwater. The distance from which we get the water is about 500 kilometers away. That's the furthest away groundwater source we tap. We have got an integrated surface water system, 3 dams that supply the water, and we have a reclamation work within Windhoek that services 20% of the demand. In the far-flung areas, we also use desalination to utilize brackish groundwater. So it's not only desalination out of the ocean, it is desalination of brackish water that opens much of the resource. So for that, of course, we need capacity to develop it in Africa as a whole. We need financing. and for that matter, affordable financing. My last aspect is transboundary issues. We have 72 transboundary aquifers in Africa, 2 of them in Namibia. 1 of them we have a transboundary agreement. Surface water is pretty much the same. There are much more, but we have 5 rivers. None of them are Namibian. All of them are transboundary. And with all of them in Namibia, we are the tail enders. So we are the recipient of what goes wrong or what is done well upstream. Now, for transboundary issues to become relevant, we believe they must be binding agreements. We cannot move on a system where might is right, and those that have the economic, political strength can determine, and we are sitting and remaining as small economies with what is left over. So transboundary agreements will only be effective if they are really binding agreements, which cannot be broken. Because we must remember, in small economies there are also living human beings. They are the same species than in rich countries. They have the same right to water. And therefore it is absolute necessary that we look into the development needs of these poorer countries, our small economies. We need to the rights of our smaller countries' people in terms of water rights, and therefore a two-pronged approach, probably. A massive input in capacity building that includes financing, but then developing transboundary agreements that are binding so that we have necessary security. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Really hitting the importance of integration across the resource system, the water resource system there. And you are giving a perfect example of transboundary, which I'm sure our next speaker will also be alluding to, but highlighting, of course, in Africa, the major challenges being faced and the opportunities, really, when groundwater is not being used to perhaps its fullest extent to maximize development there. But when you mention transboundary, I think when we have the Vice Chair, Dr. Bizak, who serves as Vice Chair of the Water Convention at the global scale, but is here also as the lead international cooperation expert at the ministry responsible for environment planning in Slovenia, I think you can probably take it in from the global to the national to the regional, and if you could share with us your views for Europe and North America, perhaps within the context of transboundary as well, how groundwater fits into this debate on how to support development.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Well, as Mr. Kayat did almost all of my job in his presentation, thank you very much. I will point to my country for the beginning, and I would like to tell you where we feel our responsibility to sit here and why we feel responsible to make dialogues. For sure, one of the truth lies in the fact that we are recognized as a water-abundant country. So in example, we have four times more water available per capita than the EU average is. And about 97% of drinking water is coming from groundwater, and it's a high quality source in good chemical status, almost everywhere in the country. Well, at the national level, we use only 3.5 of the dynamic groundwater reserves, and half of the country is covered by karst aquifers, which are extremely vulnerable, and half of the drinking water we get from these karstic aquifers. So we support groundwater management and governance by extensive and detailed legal framework, and we actively protect groundwater by established and regularly updated drinking water safe ground zones across all of the country. Besides this management on national level, we have a long tradition in transboundary water cooperation on all levels, on bilateral level with adjacent neighboring countries, on sub-regional scale in the Sava River Basin, on regional scale in the Danube Basin, and we are active at the Water Convention. Now all these facts make us responsible to talk about water, and not only to talk, but to discuss and to try to make agreements, bilateral and multilateral agreements among countries, because they are persistent. Of course, politicians are not, but agreements should be persistent. And by this, I would say, thinking, we are also entering our let's say, inputs to the Water Convention. So I would like to spare some of this rare time to explain to participants or to present, in case they do not know yet, the importance of the Water Convention in the efforts we shall all make in terms of contemporary transboundary water management. And I am sure you know that the Water Convention is a very rich convention in terms of processes, in terms of a very rich program of work, activities and publications. I would invite you all to look at them. Here I would raise at this opportunity that the UNEC Water Convention in terms of transboundary groundwaters is extremely active in terms, for example, with almost with 10 years old publication on non-binding UNESE model provision on transboundary groundwaters. So we have a product already 10 years on table. We shall use it more, as we already do. I shall raise importance also to the SDG indicator 652 and the Water Convention reporting processes in 2017 and 2020, and the next one, next year, which we shall all read, because they remind us that we are not active enough on making agreements on transboundary aquifers. They are in fact a challenge in the UNEC region, I believe, not only in the UNEC region. And to conclude, I would invite you all to join the global workshop on conjunctive management of transboundary surface waters and groundwater next year in October 2023. Water Convention is providing extremely well-prepared and well-equipped workshops. One of them we will have next week. It is on source to sea management. And this one next year will be more in terms of groundwater also, so you are all invited. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for this intervention, and also showcasing how a regional process that starts in the UNECE region and with the knowledge and capacity built from Europe has expanded into globally, also showcasing the integrated nature and the conjunctive use of resources. So experiences from the region that help globally and then bringing it down to the basin and aquifer system levels. That is really what is showcased in your efforts. Thank you. To wrap up this distinguished panel, we have a hydrogeologist, which I think is really, you feel very at home, Professor Mukherjee here. You have a distinguished career writing actually about contamination, groundwater pollution. And this is a challenge we've heard in India and quite honestly, quite across the Asia-Pacific region. If you could share with us some of your experience, I hope you'll also bring up the water quality, groundwater quality aspect in your intervention. Please, if you could share.
A very good morning, and thanks to Nino and Alice for inviting me here. So I come from India, and I'll be talking mostly about the groundwater scenario in the South region, which is, as you know, is the largest consumer of groundwater in the world as of today, and possibly in the human history. So at present, in the South Asian region, we are withdrawing about more than 600 billion cubic meters of groundwater every year, which is, as you know, it's a huge volume, and much of this are from transboundary aquifers, as well from groundwater which are very ancient, very old groundwater. So that groundwater is gone, you cannot recharge it back. Now, to give you a perspective of the usage of this groundwater, so South Asian region hosts no more than 5% of the global land cover, but we host more than 1/3 of the irrigated land and more than 1/4 of the global population. So you can imagine, the stress in groundwater that you can have, because 85% of the irrigation that we have for food production is from groundwater, and 90% of the drinking water is from groundwater. So it's just not the water, but it's also the food for this more than, almost like 2.5 billion population that lives in the South Asian region. Now, the problem is more pronounced because much of this groundwater is very heterogeneous, because the groundwater, like 70% of the groundwater is kind of hosted in only 25% of the land cover of South Asia. These are the regions, what we called the Himalayan, Himalayan rivers, the Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, Meghna, Irrawaddy. So these river systems and their alluvial fans would be hosting almost 70% of the groundwater. The rest, 30% of the groundwater is in the 70% of the land. So it's a very, very unfair distribution, if you may say. Now, you talked about the pollution, and that's another angle, because much of this groundwater, mostly this Himalayan river system, they are polluted by natural contaminants. And these contaminants includes arsenic, it includes fluoride, and as of today, the present estimate is more than 400 million people are exposed to that pollution, with more than 100 million being actively, being exposed to. So it's not just like a quantity issue, but it's also a quality issue. So it becomes a challenge how you use it, because this pollution, it does not just transmit through the water, but also through the crops that would be irrigated with that water. So the human exposure to this arsenic and fluoride and uranium is not something that we understand as of today. Now, what the governments are doing, they are trying their best to kind of manage the groundwater for this huge population. There are plans for integrated water management, surface and groundwater, but as of today, things are not working that well, because I think there is a lack of integration between science and policy and governance, so that needs to be bolstered. Now, one thing I forgot to mention, that it is not just the groundwater. This huge abstraction of groundwater are also drying the rivers, the mega rivers, like the Indus, the Ganges, and the Brahmaputra. And as you know, this is where almost one-fourth of the human population lives. So they are just drying out. And that's a challenge in the future too.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights. 400 million people, 500 million people being affected by this group of water systems, and how groundwater really has an aspect for linking also to food security. So I think our two hydrogeologists at the end of this panel are happy with this high-level panel, but we're not done yet. We have insights being shared with us. I believe we have a recording by Her Excellency Steffi Lemke, who, yes, if we can start putting that up, and I'm putting on notice our rapporteurs at the end, who will give us one sentence after Her Excellency, the Federal Minister, intervention, to give us a one-sentence wrap-up after this. So I will introduce our rapporteurs afterwards. But Minister Lemke is the Federal Minister for the Ministry of Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety, and Consumer Protection of Germany, and has been supporting actually a series of dialogues through a bond process that have contributed to the Water Action Decade, and in preparation for the midterm comprehensive review that will be happening next year. And we were very pleased that actually the bond process had a regional component where they had dialogues happening as part of their process in the 5 parts of the world. And I'm hoping the recording will come up so that we can hear that before we wrap up.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted that this event is drawing attention to the critical issue of groundwater in the run-up to the UN 2023 Water Conference. My warm thanks to the organizers of the UN Water Summit on groundwater. In many regions, groundwater is the main source of drinking water. It is essential for water security. That is particularly important in times of climate crisis and the global food crisis. Groundwater warrants special protection from pollution and overuse. We can only give everyone access to safe drinking water if there is an adequate supply of clean groundwater. Only this will enable us to preserve valuable ecosystems and ensure the sustainable development of our economies and societies. This requires the use and integrated management of all water resources. Groundwater played a central role in the preparations by the UN Regional Economic Commissions for the UN 2023 Water Conference. This process was financially supported by Germany. The regional perspectives presented there, for example, on the status of groundwater resources and on regional challenges and opportunities, will help inform the Water Action Agenda and the Water Conference. The UN 2023 Water Conference in March offers unprecedented potential for progress on SDG 6 and all water-related goals of the 2030 Agenda. Groundwater was also a topic of the Bonn Water Dialogues for Results, the high-level meeting organized by my ministry on behalf of the German government. In a participatory process, this event led to the Bonn key messages and recommendations, which are now supported by 64 UN member states. They also cover the protection and sustainable use of groundwater. This protection must be guaranteed in all sectors, including agriculture. To ensure that this can succeed, groundwater management needs to apply 5 acceleration instruments: governance, data and information, innovation, capacity development, finance. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted that decision makers and stakeholders from around the world have actively contributed to this preparatory process. We must take our resolve even further at next year's conference and in our voluntary commitments, so that we can fully tap the potential of the Year of Water 2023. I invite you to use the Bonn key messages and recommendations as an inspiration and a practical guide for initiatives and commitments under the UN 2023 Water Conference. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you to the government of Germany, to Minister Lemke for supporting the preparations for the water conference in March and for the regional dialogues that helped to inform also our session here today. But we're not done yet. We have some closing key messages. I'd like to ensure that our faithful team here, comprised of, our team, Tracy Zarur from ESQA, who's a hydrogeologist actually in our group in ESQA, and of course, Dr. Hakim Heraz, who is a member of the Académie Française of Water, who also used to serve in the region at the OSS. Would one of you or both of you like to share a key message or a key statement that comes out of the dialogue today, as you'll be sharing it and conveying it in the final report?
Bonjour à tous, merci infiniment. Nous avons essayé de...
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to try and summarize everything that's been said. We had very rich exchanges. So we have had many eminent figures speaking to us about the initiatives across the globe. And it is undeniable that the management of this resource, which is still invisible to so many people across the world, that this management becomes more visible. And we also need to make sure that there's a finance that goes with it. We have also seen that there can be over-exploitation, under-exploitation, degradation of the quality of these resources, lack of funding, lack of human resources, etc. And the solutions are not the same according to different cases either. Sometimes it's about regulating demand, and sometimes it's about better regulating transboundary resources, training personnel, changing mentalities, financing, etc. The common denominator in all of this is the fact that we're in an urgent situation. We are behind schedule. when it comes to our sustainable development goals. And it has to be dealt with at the economic, political, social level, and ultimately financing, innovation, research, etc., and capacity building. These are not things that we should take for granted. So we have an ever-changing and ever-worsening climate change situation, and that's going to affect our well-being and the well-being of our future generations. So we need to hurry up.
Thank you for providing that wrap-up of this very distinguished panel. Thank you to all of you. Merci, shukran for all of you for coming bright and early as we start up this second day of the Groundwater Summit. I believe we're starting the next session in just a few minutes. Thank you very much.